I'm coming home.
Pass picked off by Foch. Here comes the ball. Somehow Durant lets it go.
Unstoppable player we have in the NBA today.
Let's go. The Milwaukee Bucks select Jabari Parker.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Return to the Mac. Get up what it is, what it does.
Hello everybody and welcome back to our NBA preview shows. We are moving on to the Southeast Division, wrapping up the Eastern Conference around the NBA. Steven, was this division, like so many, I think there's some good teams, some improved teams, and there's always many questions to be answered.
Yeah, this is it. It's almost like the poor relation in some respects. Now, it's no disrespect to some of these teams now because it's where the things have changed on the Miami Heat. You've got all the furore over in the Central Division, and the Atlantic is always at the forefront on a lot of people's minds due to the big markets that are in that particular division. But yeah, I mean, let's not sell this division short.
Let's start with the Orlando Magic. I think this is a really interesting situation. I think a really fun team as well. They're going to be a league pass favourite for so many. It's year 3 post Dwight. And the thing I keep coming back to them is they have no identity yet. You know, they draft the young guys. I like the Aaron Gordon pick. I love the Elfrid Payton pick. I think that's a fabulous pickup for them. I can't believe that Sacramento Kings passed up Elfrid Payton. He's going to be dynamite. Victor Oladipo as well. But then they go out and splash money on Channing Frye. They splash money on a Ben Gordon contract for 2 years, $9 million. Are you kidding me? That's a bizarre contract. And they've got this coach, Jack Vaughn, who I don't think is very good. So I don't know where this team's at right now. It's year 3 post, like we said, having Dwight Howard there. And yet we still don't seem to have any sort of identity with this Orlando Magic team.
No, I don't know what they're trying to be. I mean, they traded away their top scorer last year as well in Aaron Aflalo, which was fine. I think they needed to open up that backcourt because it was becoming quite crowded, and they really moved away from it now. And Jameer Nelson's obviously gone, and they're going to go with Peyton Oladipo. I like that as a combination. I think that's very good. I mean, Tobias Harris can also give you something as well at small forward. Channing Frye, I think that was one of the great stories of last season, watching him come back and how he performed at times with the Phoenix Suns. And Vucevic is one of my favourite players around the league. His actual stats are not actually that far off of Dwight's from an offensive standpoint, and his rebounding numbers as well. So he really didn't miss a beat there. Obviously, he hasn't got the defensive presence that Dwight Howard brings to the team, but I don't like the coach. Some of the signings, as you say, are a bit of a surprise to me. Let's be a bit polite about it. Ben Gordon, I mean, when was the last time he was actually relatively decent? I mean, it's certainly not been since the post-Bulls days. I mean, he's earned a hell of a lot of money. I mean, you look at guys that have earned money and done very little. Ben Gordon's one of those. He's done incredibly well for himself, and I suppose there's a lot of people on these shores that are not too happy with him because he is a Great Britain international in a very loose sense of words, since he never actually played for us. But yeah, I mean, I think this is, again, it's another stepping stone into going over into a more of a youth movement, and that's why I don't really quite understand the Channing Frye signing. I think it's almost like make or break for Orlando. And if they don't make the playoffs, which I don't think they will, then Jack Vaughn's going to go.
Yeah, they're way off the playoffs. You need veterans to win in this league. Winning in the league is not easy. You just go and look at the teams. That Philadelphia team was a train wreck last year, but they had some vets to begin with in Spencer Orr, Thad Young, and Evan Turner. They won some games. It's so difficult to win night in, night out. This team has no hope right now to go every night and try and win with Elfrid Payton, Oladipo, Harris, Frye, and Vucevic. And the Jack Vaughn thing's really interesting because there's a ton of good coaches out there right now waiting for a phone call. And the main one that I think people start to point to throughout the season, we both asked the same question in this piece here. What about Jack Vaughn? How long does he have? How will he perform? I don't think he's a good coach at all. And Mark Jackson sat out there. And it's a really tempting scenario to come in for a coach with the young youth movement, with Aaron Gordon, with a point guard in place in Elfrid Payton, who's just a pit bull on both sides of the court. Vucevic is your franchise center as well. That's a job that screams Mark Jackson to me.
Yeah, it does scream Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson, for one, shouldn't be out of the league. It's a ludicrous scenario when he's out of the league and Jason Kidd is coaching in the league. But I mean, that's one of those things, coaches are available and you can go and get those guys. And Jack Vaughan should also not be a coach in this league. I'd like to see Mark Jackson work with some of these younger guys, and I think he could do a really tremendous job. I think it's like everything else. Mark Jackson can only take a team so far. And I think Orlando need a guy that can take them that far. He's not a guy for me that's going to ultimately lead you to a championship, but he's a guy that could elevate you and get you to a point where you could become a potential playoff team year in, year out. I mean, that for Orlando right now would be great. I mean, they're so far off of that, and they haven't been anywhere near that since the post-Dwight days. They're trying to rebuild and try and get over that particular scenario. It's very difficult when you've had a guy like Dwight Howard, and you forget that Dwight Howard pretty much carried this team on his back to an NBA Finals. Didn't really have a lot else around him to try and ultimately get him the big prize. But Orlando are far away from that. But there are some pieces. I mean, I do like Aaron Gordon, Alfred Payton. I think they're one of the teams that had a very, very good draft, and that looks good in the future. But the future really shouldn't include Jack Vaughan as coach, and I'd be very surprised if he lasts the whole season.
Yeah, I think he's going to be gone somewhere around the All-Star break, maybe even earlier, and they'll bring in Mark Jackson. They have to jump out on the Mark Jackson thing because a ton of teams are going to want him going into next season when they're undecided on their head coaches. I really, really dislike the Aaron Aflalo trade. I thought they got fleeced. Yep. They got back essentially Evan Fournier straight up. Aflalo's really good. He has one of the best contracts in the league. I understand they probably didn't get any better trade offers. He's not a big name, but he's a proven scorer. I would have just kept that contract. I mean, I know that it backs up the backcourt. You want to unleash Victor Oladipo, but if you kept Aaron Aflalo and there's a contender who didn't think they were a contender as we get down towards the trade deadline, I would have just kept him into this year. I thought, it's like they traded simply just to get him out of the building, not for any sort of locker room thing, just because they wanted the young guy to now step up. But you gave him away for nothing. Just wait it out. I don't understand that trade in any sense. And then you go and you bring in, like you said, Channing Frye in a 4-year, $32 million deal. I don't like that deal either. It's just an odd situation in Orlando right now. Yeah,
I mean, the Aflalo one to me was quite ridiculous. I mean, I'm sitting here with my Bulls hat on at the time when that deal went down. I was like, man, why didn't the Bulls even get involved in that? I mean, we needed a shooting guard, and Aflalo would have been a really great asset for us.
He makes $8 million. He's a 20-point scorer.
Exactly. I mean, he's underpaid for what he gives you. You never ever trade those guys away. I mean, I can understand it. As I say, they had the backcourt jam last year where they really kind of had to pay Oladipo at the point guard because they had Aflalo. You'd have probably gone a 3-guard rotation if it was me a hell of a lot of the time. But that's me. That's not who's actually coaching this team, unfortunately. But that's the way I'd have looked at it. But yeah, you basically traded away a guy who was underpaid just to open up a spot. And it's not a good enough reason for me to be able to do that. And then to say you basically are bringing in a guy like Channing Frye who's earning what Aflalo was earning.
Yeah, I mean, Aflalo was an $8 million guy. You look at that backcourt rotation now, I mean, you've got to think there was room in there for Elfrid Payton. I don't think he's going to play full starters minutes. The guy's a rookie. Victor, I don't know how long he's going to play. And then when you go to the bench, you're turning to Fournier and Ridnour, Willie Green and Ben Gordon. I mean, man, give me back Aaron Aflalo. Very, very bizarre trade.
Yeah, and everything as well, like Channing Frye. I mean, how long is he going to play? How many games is he realistically going to play? I mean, I know, again, you'll bring Aaron Gordon in there, as much as you possibly can. But, yeah, I mean, that's another worrying scenario. I mean, I think Orlando, they only won 23 games last year.
They may not win that this year.
Potentially actually win even less this year.
Mm-hmm. That'll be fun though, Aaron Gordon with the dunks and Elfrid Payton is really fun throwing lobs. It's going to be it's a sneaky league pass team to watch. Coach Marv's question, as with every team as we run through this series, our friend and Coach Marv will send a question for each and every team. He says, Elfrid Payton, is their system conducive to him having a legit shot at being a Rookie of the Year candidate? I think he's great. I think he's going to be really good long term. I just look at them and they have no shooting outside of Channing Frye. Can they space the floor enough to let him work in those little creases, really drive to the hoop and get enough points a night to be in consideration for Rookie of the Year?
On another year, you could potentially consider him. I wouldn't say he was ever going to be a front running favourite for the award, but he would definitely be one of the guys who could potentially win it. Not this year. It's unless things go really very wrong very quickly, it's Jabari Parker's to win and lose. But I think Alfred Payton will be one of those guys that we'll look back on at the end of the season and say, you know what, he was a tremendous rookie player, and he'll potentially make the all-rookie first team.
I think he will do. The thing with both of them they've got going in their favour, I mean, Jabari's going to be the number one option for Milwaukee, and Alfred will have the ball in his hands. He's the ball handler, so they both have that in their favour. Let's move on from the Orlando Magic. Let's go to the Atlanta Hawks. This is a puzzling, very tricky situation. Their off-season's been a whirlwind, to say the very least. My main question with them is, they're now going through this ownership transition. We don't have an exact owner yet. And so I posed this question to you earlier today, and I'm so desperate to get your answer on this because I think it's really interesting. They've got a really good core. I love Al Horford. I love Millsap. And I'm a major Kyle Korver fan. I think he's terrific. Outside, he's no longer just a come off screens, spot up 3-point shooter. There's a fantastic Zach Lowe piece breaking down what he does last year. Now he's splitting the double team. He's the best at driving into the lane, pumping and hitting the mid-range shot. He's really developed his game. And now he's playing the two as well. And his hand, doing enough defensively. What happens if those guys aren't enough for a new owner? You get a flashy owner in a guy new breed to the NBA, almost like a Steve Ballmer, LA Clippers situation. And he's like, yeah, these guys give us points and wins, but I want to get, Deron Williams. I want this guy. I want that guy. I want these former All-Stars. That's my major concern with them, is they're going to get the wrong owner in for what this team is.
I'll ask you one question. Who's the superstar?
Well, they don't have one.
Exactly. They don't have a superstar.
They don't need one.
Which means they'll never, ever make it that far in the playoffs. Al Horford is as near to a superstar as you're going to get, and he's not a superstar.
Millsap's an all-star.
He's an all-star. He's a star, but he's not a superstar. And that's a big issue, isn't it? I mean, Atlanta have tried to bring in a superstar, and for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked. Going back to the Kyle Korver piece, I did want to touch on that for a moment. That is actually one of the best articles I've ever read.
It's unreal.
From a basketball point of view.
The amount of GIFs as well. I'm a big GIF fan. It's spectacular. I encourage people just to Google Zach Lowe, Kyle Korver. You get a true appreciation. This isn't just a white guy who shoots jumpers. And that's why I find it laughable when people compare Doug McDermott to him, which is just because they're white jump shooters. Like, go and look at what Kyle Korver does intrinsically on a basketball court. Just read that article. It explains everything for you. It's spectacular.
Yeah, it is. And Kyle Korver is one of those guys. I mean, Zach, I don't want to give away too much in the article, but Zach kind of says like how he's changed his game and developed from just being that 3-point shooter to being so much more and a much bigger weapon. I mean, we all followed along with much interest with these 3-point streak, but it was so much more to it than just that. You can't have a guy who's just going to be a 3-point specialist and be that successful and be a starting player in his league. Unfortunately, the Bulls didn't have that foresight that the Atlanta Hawks have got. I've got nothing wrong against our starting five. I mean, I think obviously for me, as I've said it, the big three is Horford, Millsap, and Jeff Teague. I mean, Jeff Teague, in potentially another era, would be one of the better point guards. Unfortunately, it's a point guard deep league, and therefore he's not going to break into top 10 point guards, but he still does a tremendous job. Paul Millsap really elevated his game last year when Al Horford went out injured. Now, I think with Horford back, I think Millsap's numbers may very well come down as we would expect them to. And I don't think he can certainly come close to what he did produce last year. I think that's one of my big concerns for them. Al Horford is always a big question mark. We touched on this on one of the other previews, is the fact that he is 2 major injuries in the last 3 years. We don't know what to expect from him. He's in that Derrick Rose, Kobe Bryant kind of thing where we don't know what we're going to get. These players can look very, very good in pre-season. But let's see what they do actually in the regular season when the notch is turned up some.
I mean, yeah.
It's a good team, but it's not a great team. And I don't think this team makes the playoffs.
I've got them in the playoffs. I think they're really good because of the coach, and they're going to win a ton of games. My only issue is, like I said, I think they're really good. I just think an owner's going to come in, and playoffs won't be enough. And not even just the playoffs aren't enough, but he's going to look at his roster and go, Al Horford's pretty good. I like the numbers. Kyle Korver's decent, but he's making X amount of money. Jeff Teague's decent, but I want to go and get a multi-time All-Star. I want to go and land a big guy in a trade. And not that that's easy, but I think that that's the route they'll go. Because that's what new owners do. We've seen it for so many years now. Vivek Ranadiv in the Kings. I mean, Rudy Gay isn't a big name, but he made the Rudy Gay trade. Everyone knew he was going to make a trade because that's what new owners do. And they want to go and get a multi-time All-Star or a quote-unquote big name. And Millsap, Horford, Teague, Korver just aren't, but they're all really good. And I think Budenholzer's a great coach. Everyone can shoot, and it's that San Antonio style of sharing the basketball, and everyone can shoot. He comes from that school of thought, so he's a great coach. I think they got some good players, some really good players, and some all-stars. And also, after interviewing them in last year's game, two of the most boring men on the planet in Paul Millsap and Pero Antic. But I'll let them off with that one. I think they're a good team, and they got a shot at the playoffs.
Yeah, for me, I think either Al Horford will either be injured or he'll be gone.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll move him along. So either way, I think they're going to have a tough road. They'll be one of those teams that'll be battling it out for that 8th spot in the playoffs. I'd kind of got the Knicks there at the moment. But, I mean, the Hawks will have a say in that. If they can keep Horford healthy and they'll have him all year, then maybe they get the 8th spot. But at the moment, that's a big question mark for me. And they didn't look great. They didn't look great at times. And then they gave Indiana a hell of a series. And that was a bit of a surprise. And on another day, they probably could have won that series. But it just shows how far the pace had fallen at that point, that the Atlanta Hawks actually gave them a really good 7-game series.
You said here, outside of those big three you mentioned, Millsap, Teague, Horford, who's going to step up? I really like Dennis Schroeder, however you want to say it. Mm-hmm. I liked him throughout that draft process in what was a really poor draft. I think he can be a pretty good 6th man coming off the bench, almost in the way that Bledsoe was supposed to be with the Clippers, but he was better than that. He was probably deserving of a starting spot as a sort of a zero guards type of thing, but Schroeder's really athletic, so can defend his position somewhat, and can really ignite. He goes on runs of 12 points in a flash. I think he's the guy who's going to step up for them and be a big time contributor.
Yeah, I think he's a potential one to step up. Obviously, we know what we're going to get with Kyle Korver. Kevin Bazemore showed some flashes last year as well, so it'll be interesting to see what he does on a different team. And Adrian Payne as well. I mean, he was a guy that at one point was rumoured to be going to Chicago as one of their targets. And I think he could play a key role as well, coming off the bench in that second unit.
Coach Marv's question for the Atlanta Hawks, he says, did the Hawks find themselves a defensive anchor that no one talked about with Adrian Payne? They selected Payne with the 15th overall pick. I don't know of a defensive anchor, but Horford isn't a great defender. Millsap's okay for his position if he's guarding 4s. So it has to be pretty good for him. I mean, that's the reason they brought him in, and he can stretch the floor somewhat. So I think it's a really good pick for them.
Yeah, it is a really good pick for them. As I say, Chicago were looking at in that sort of area as well in the draft, and he was one of the guys that were rumoured and certainly flying around on certain mock drafts. So he came across my table because I tend to take a look at draft picks across the board, but when somebody's kind of on the Bulls' radar, they kind of get special attention. So, yeah, I mean, Adrian Payne, I think, is a really good pickup for them and could provide very solid minutes. And again, he could get a real big opportunity should something happen to Horford or Millsap or whatever. So he could definitely get his shot. I mean, I think him and Mike Scott better be ready to go at some point this year.
Let's go to the nation's capital then and look at the Washington Wizards. 44-38 last year. They lost in the Eastern Conference semi-finals. I thought they had a pretty bad off-season. I'm not going to lie with you. They lose Trevor Reeves, who I think is really, really good, and upgrades Houston in the sign and trade. They bring in Paul Pierce, who, I love. He's the truth. But at this stage in his career, who knows about him night in, night out. They bring in Chris Humphries, who I saw a ton of at Boston last year, and is a pretty decent player. He deserves to be in the league, but he's no game changer for them. And they gave Marcin Gortat that contract that I still can't quite figure out. 5 years, $60 million. They didn't really move the needle for themselves for a team that went to the Eastern Conference semi-finals and wants to go to that next level. I don't know if they have this vision that Paul Pierce will be the closer that comes in for them, but we saw a team try and do that in Brooklyn. Paul Pierce wasn't closing out any games for anyone. in a big time spot. Now they lose Bradley Beal for a couple of months. We don't know how long that's going to be. This team, which was my favourite for at least the 3rd seed, and I thought with continuity could have been there or thereabouts to disrupt the Bulls and disrupt the Cavs. Now everything's up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, I'd even with Beal and even if they've had a reasonably good off season, they're not going to compete with what the Cavs and the Bulls can put on the table at this particular point in time. I mean, they did incredibly well last year. I mean, I thought Whitman did an incredible job from a coaching point of view. Thoroughly outplayed Chicago in the playoff series. Should have swept that series, but for Dunleavy's heroics. Letting go of Reza, I wasn't a fan, but it doesn't surprise me that he went. There was a lot of things flying around him. They've got probably one of the best backcourts in the NBA. Obviously, now they're going to struggle a bit with Bradley Beal being out for 2 months, and that could mean they could get off to a bad start. I mean, you touch on a Gortat contract there. I don't actually mind that contract because, again, I look at these contracts and think in a couple of years' time when the new CBA hits, that contract's not going to be it's not going to look that bad. It's just going to look like a really good contract at that particular point in time. If I can
just put in there for a second, I'd agree with you if he wasn't a 30-year-old big. Like, that'd be great if he was 27-year-old and then by the time the new CBA kicks in, he's like 29 and that contract isn't too bad. He'll be 35 on that contract. That's not good.
Yeah, but he won't be 35 when the CBA comes in. That's the thing. And he last year was really, really good for them. He was the thing that really helped elevate them. I really liked the pickup from day one.
I like
seeing him in a playoff series. I mean, he showed how much he had actually matured. That gives him a hell of a front court for me, him and Nene. I mean, I'm not convinced about Paul Pierce. I'm not even going to try and understand exactly what he can give them. Whether he is the closer they want and whether they don't trust John Wall to be able to do that is another matter. But I think Paul Pierce has been brought in to try and help some of these guys and be like a more of a locker room guy. But I mean, that's a bit of a situation to put the team in, then having to rely on a guy that can't really do that much on the court anymore. I mean, they want Paul Pierce of 5 years ago. They don't want Paul Pierce 2014.
I think they want the veteran leadership, not just in the locker room. He can still play. He can still get his buckets. He's just such a liability defensively that you desperately need both Wall and Beal out there to cover for him. So I don't know what Whitman's going to go with now that Beal's out, And I don't necessarily think they don't trust John Wall in like the clutch or, whatever. Have as many guys as you can who perform routinely well in that clutch. You don't just need one option guy. That's something that many organizations struggle with and the star themselves struggle with. They're not trying to say we're taking the ball out of John Wall's hands in the last 2 minutes because this guy's got a proven record. It's like, if you're being double teamed, why not kick it to a wide open Paul Pierce? Do you not trust him more than, a regular small forward? Do you trust him more in the last 2 minutes than Trevor Ariza? I'd like to have Ariza for the large part of the season, but if he's gone, it's not a bad signing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you kick it to the open guy. It doesn't matter if that guy's a closer or not. It just doesn't make the blinds bit different.
I agree. I'm not saying, what I'm saying is once the ball gets there, you feel more comfortable with the ball in Paul Pierce's hands.
Paul Pierce 2008, 2009, yes. Paul Pierce 2014, no thank you.
You don't think he can make an open jump shot?
I'm not saying he can't make an open jump shot. It's just I don't trust Paul Pierce at this stage of his career to be the guy that they want him to be and take this team to the next level.
Do you find it odd that he's not in LA with Doc?
I think that's the thing that a lot of people thought might happen. But I mean, 2 years, 10.8 million. Yeah, would you really turn that down if you were Paul Pierce? Possibly not. I mean, he's going to come into a situation where, I mean, we talked about the Wizards being probably the third best team in the Eastern Conference. So they're going to make a really good playoff run at this. I think the interesting thing for them is going to be how slow they might get out of the gate. I mean, anytime you've got one of your key contributors out for a couple of months, that's really going to hinder your progress. Could they put themselves into a situation where they've got too much ground to make up and they don't actually win the division? Because if they don't win the division, then they could cause themselves problems when it comes to playoff scenarios. And they might find themselves being the team that should have gone to the second round like they did last year to being a team that's a first round exit.
Coach Marv's question, has Paul Pierce really got that desire to go all season long? I don't think so. If he had the desire to go all season long, he'd be wearing Celtic green right now or Clipper white, blue, red, whichever one they're going to wear. He would have took like a really small contract and rang them and said, bring me in. Brooklyn didn't offer him a contract. The Celtics didn't offer him a contract. The Clippers didn't offer him a contract. The team that did do and overpaid for him stupidly. Why would you just bring him in on a 1-year deal? Very silly decision from them, and he just took the money. He doesn't want to go hard every night. He went, I think it was 28 minutes a game last year, somewhere in that region, 28-30. Him and Garnett were massively reduced. He doesn't have a desire to go every night.
No, he doesn't. You talk about contracts. I mean, Pierce 2 years, Chris Humphries 3 years. Really?
The Humphries deal is weird.
3 years.
That is really odd. He was not good for the Celtics. Like, I watched more Celtics basketball than most people would have done because I'm a fan, because I was working for CLNS last year. He was one of the best players on their team, but they were really, really bad. Like, you would look good in any front court if the running mate with you is Kelly Olynyk and suddenly you've got 4 rebounds. It's pretty nice to see. He's not great, and they've done really weird things with their salary cap and put themselves into holes that they don't need to be in.
No, I mean, I don't like the money that's been spent. I think they're kind of, trying to add players to the roster, but really at the moment they can't add the players that maybe they want to add.
Would you rather have
players already have?
Would you rather have Humphries and Pierce for 2 and 3 years, or Trevor Ariza?
I'd rather have Trevor Ariza, but I don't think that Trevor Ariza was going to re-sign with Washington, unfortunately, and that was what the key thing was. They had to move him out of there, and I don't think they really had much choice in the situation.
I don't know, man. I really don't know with these deals. If you just give him the money, he's staying around.
Yeah, it's all about paying the tax, though, isn't it?
How much did he sign for in Houston?
I haven't got the numbers right in front of me, but I know that the deal, the contracts that were flying around at the time, and the rumor of what he wanted was the fact that he didn't want a contract that was less than what, really speaking, what the Washington Wizards were potentially going to offer him.
He got 4 years, 32.
Yeah,
which is an $8 million average salary, which isn't a lot. Pierce is on 2 years, 10. That's $5 million. Chris Humphries 3 years, 13 million. That's the money right there. I mean, they botched that situation. Let's be real.
Hey, but you know what? They get a trade exception.
The
thing that nobody ever uses.
Is there anything more basketball nerdy than two fans laughing over a trade exception?
Probably not, because it always sticks in my throat, knowing full well that the Bulls got a trade exception for Kyle Korver.
Yeah, that's nasty. You know who had the worst offseason this year?
I know what you're going to say, and it's very easy to say that, but I don't actually think they actually did that bad.
Oh,
this
come on
offseason
now.
In a reaction to what actually happened. They could have done much worse.
It doesn't matter what they did after what happened. They lost the best basketball player on the planet. Whether they
lose the best basketball player on the planet, he decided to go home.
Exactly. That's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. And I saw Michael Rappaport, the TV guy, and he did that 30 for 30, I think it's called the Gardens of Eden or something, to do with the New York Knicks. He's spot on. LeBron really has got such a free pass because he went home, which is a lie. He went there because Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving are there. He should have brought the band back for one more year in Miami. It doesn't matter how well you react to the situation. The fact is that they lost the best basketball player on the planet. He's not going to be lining up with the heat across his chest anymore. He's going to have Cavs there. That's a bad off-season. Doesn't matter whether you meant it, whether you could have helped it, whatever. It's a bad off-season all around if you lose the best basketball player on the planet. But let's talk to those reactions, Stephen Edwards. Because what they did then was they gave Luol Deng 2 years, 19 million. Josh McRoberts, 4 years, 22 million. Danny Granger, 2 year, 4 million. They draft Shabazz Napier. That was before LeBron left. They gave Chris Bosh 5 years, 118. Dwayne Wade, 2 years, 31. Chris Anderson, 2 years, 10. Mario Chalmers, 2 years, 8. Udonis Haslem, 2 years, 5. There's a lot of thanks for what you did contracts there.
Yeah, there is, and all those all those contracts are all coming off the books at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
All these 2 year contracts, they're clearing the deck for 2 years' time.
And I
Apart
believe
from Bosch.
Kevin Durant may be available in 2 years' time.
Funnier things have happened.
Kevin Durant may have no rings in 2 years' time. LeBron had no rings. Where do you go to learn how to win? Pat Riley? Eric Spoelstra?
You just don't know. So obviously, it's 2 years. A lot of these contracts are 2 years, and they're clearing the decks for 2 years' time. Apart from that Bosch contract,
They want Kevin Durant. I mean, everyone does, but
yeah, everyone wants Kevin Durant.
they've positioned
anyone who says they don't is a liar.
They've positioned themselves to feasibly be in the position to sign Kevin Durant.
Yeah, and the free agent class of 2 years' time, they're going to try and they'll be in a position where they can bring in a couple of max guys at that point.
It's clever. Let's go through each deal then. The Luol Deng one, 2 years, 19.
I'm fine with that. The Bulls actually offered 3 at 30 at one particular point last season. He didn't like it. So, actual fact, Deng has actually taken a slight pay cut from what the Bulls originally offered him to go and play for the team that he hated playing against when he was a member of the Bulls. Yeah, that's going to work out well when the Heat come back into Chicago.
I think he hated playing them because he had to go against LeBron James on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, but also that Bulls-Heat rivalry was pretty darn tough. So it'd be interesting to see what his reaction is when he comes back to Chicago for the first time.
The interesting moves was really Josh McRoberts, Danny Granger, and Shabazz Napier, because they were all just prior to... There was no reactionary stuff then. That was almost in a last-ditch effort. Well, really, you think of the timetable now, I think they knew. If you think of the timetable, when they signed McRoberts, it was like 2 days before. I think they knew he was out the door then, so I don't know what these contracts are. The Josh McRoberts one, I think he's a really good player, but I just don't know what this team is now. It seems to me just like a 2-year tie-over. Chris Bosh is going to be really good for 2 years. Let's run the offense through him. What will we get out of Dwayne Wade? We'll at least give him a retirement package. And then everyone else comes off the books in 2 years, and it's supposed to be a really good free agency class in 2016.
Yeah, this is what they've built for. We don't know, again. This will come out eventually as to who knew what and when. Certainly from a Miami point of view. We're beginning to piece together the puzzle pieces from a Cleveland point of view, but from a Miami point of view.
The Cleveland puzzle pieces are pretty evident. They knew for about a week before he released his letter they were coming. Suddenly he writes a letter, there's no not Dion Waiters, there's no Anthony Bennett or Andrew Wiggins in the letter. Suddenly Kevin Love's available, and they trade Andrew Wiggins and Anthony Bennett.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So from a Cleveland point of view, we're pretty much there, but from a Miami Heat point of view, we really aren't there. The McRoberts deal to me looked a bit funny at the time. I didn't particularly like the money spent that way. Danny Granger, I think, depending on what they get from Granger, that's a really good deal. But we don't know what he's going to be. He hasn't been pretty much anything since he's come back from injury. But we could think about that being from a point of view of the scenario that he's actually in. So that'll be interesting. The Shabazz Napier one is always the one that makes me laugh because that was like the rubber stamp of approval on draft night. That was a player that LeBron said he wanted, and all of a sudden then LeBron's going. So it always strikes me as a bit of a strange one. But the other ones I'm not really too concerned about because again, as it is a thank you package. Especially like Haslam. You honestly think he's earning 2 years at $5.6 million? Not a chance is he earning that. I'm the Birdman, 2 years at $10 million. Come on. Mario Chalmers, 2 years at 8.3 for me is actually the more humorous one of the three. Bearing in mind that guy can't defend anything, was absolutely shocking in the NBA Finals last year, and really probably, in some respects, should be almost on his way out of the league. And yet he's getting $8.3 million. Yeah, that's a thank you for a couple of championships.
It really is weird when you sit and you reflect and look at them because everything happens so fast in 48 hours. We're all talking about the LeBron story and not too much what Miami had done. Everything was in sequence. Do you think they had 2 packages in play? This is another good question. I'm getting lost in my thoughts. I've got so much flying off with the Heat. Everyone's asking this question. I've heard it on a ton of previews. Did LeBron screw the Heat the way he did it? If he told Cleveland a week before and he hadn't told the Heat and they only found out in the letter or, an hour prior, did he screw the Heat for what they did for him? I'm not talking about leaving. Leaving is fine. He's a free agent. That's what really ticks me off. And that's something Michael Rappaport said that really annoyed me. He shouldn't leave. The guy can do what he wants. He's a free agent. Yeah. He can do whatever he wants. You can't get annoyed at someone for leaving. but maybe not informing a team that helps you become a champion, that your best friend plays for, you were his best man at his wedding. I don't know, man. That might be a bit fishy.
Yeah, I mean, as again, we're inferring as to when the Heat knew, and that's something that we don't know at this point, really. You'd like to think that if he's discussed it with Cleveland at that particular point, he should be saying exactly the same thing to Miami, that this is what's going to happen, so they can then prepare in the best possible way they can. But does LeBron owe Miami that? And that's what the question comes down to. He won a couple of championships with the team, but does a player owe a franchise?
And professional
he
courtesy.
Owes him a straight answer. That's
true. Professional courtesy and respect, though. And I'm not saying he owes them nothing. Like the Daniel Levitard, the billboard, he never said thank you to Miami. He doesn't have to go out and thank them. Professional courtesy to let everyone know at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. And at the moment, we don't know whether that was the case or not. We can't infer. We don't know.
I think we kind of know.
Until the 30 for 30 documentary is made, which it will be
very soon.
We don't know. I'm not going to say, because I don't have the facts in front of me to know exactly when LeBron told Miami that he was going to go to Cleveland.
Do you think that they would have brought those guys back on those contracts had he returned?
If they'd have brought those guys back on those contracts, if LeBron had returned, I am sure that LeBron would have walked into training camp wearing a Mike Miller Miami Heat jersey. And that would have just said exactly how he felt, because they would have gone way into the luxury tax. And bearing in mind that Mike Miller was allowed to go from the team because they weren't going to pay him. They wanted to get rid of him under the luxury tax provision and amnesty him. That really wouldn't have sat well with LeBron. I mean, we've both inferred now, and I think we are right in what we say, is I think that's when the tide started to turn for LeBron and maybe thinking about going back to Cleveland at that particular point, because that was kind of almost the ultimate slap in the face that you weren't going to continue to pay one of LeBron's best friends who was doing a really good job for the team. It wasn't like he was, like the Jack Haley of the team that's been brought on to try and babysit Dennis Rodman. We're talking about Mike Miller, who was a very big key contributor for the Miami Heat during their championship runs. It was almost like that cold-hearted, no, we're gonna amnesty him because we want to free up that salary off the books so we don't have to pay that luxury tax. And then watching him go, and then lo and behold, of course, now that LeBron's in Cleveland, is that Mike Miller's going to go there. I mean, I know now that some Memphis Grizzlies fans are not happy with that. But, I mean, they've come out as far as and calling him a traitor for leaving them.
For leaving Memphis.
Yeah,
he was there for a year.
Memphis, because he'd gone back home to Memphis. He'd been successful in the early part of his career, and it was almost like he was going to try and finish his career in Memphis. But then the opportunity came about to then go and play in Cleveland with LeBron James. He's jumped at that opportunity to go and do that, and Memphis fans are not happy with that. But that's where everything started. And that's what we now know. It's an interesting situation for Miami, because I think there's so many people talking about this Miami Heat team, even though there isn't LeBron there, as to where they will fall, how far they will fall. I still think this team's a playoff team. Yeah, I really do. I don't think the East is that great to start taking this team out of playoff contention. And it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't actually lead this division out of the gate because of what Washington are faced with.
I think that they're going to be really good in the regular season. I think they're going to shock someone in the playoffs. I think they're a good team. They got a top 10 player in Chris Bosh, in my personal opinion. You factor in the championships and stuff as well. They got Dwayne Wade, who may not be Dwayne Wade of old, but we may see something, particularly in the playoffs. He was really good until the finals, if we all remember. The last two games of the Eastern Conference Finals, he sucked. But up to that, he was really good throughout the playoffs. And they have a great coach in Eric Spoelstra. He just is really good. That wins you a ton of basketball games, having a good coach. So they should still be pretty good. Talk about Dwayne Wade then, because there's Coach Marv's question. It's been your question as well. How's he going to hold up? Coach Marv says here from a tactical point of view, but we see him more down the block, maybe not having to be that flashes and fly past people. What do you think we'll see from Dwayne Wade this year?
If they play Dwayne Wade more than 60 games this season, they're being ridiculous, and I don't think they will do for a start. I think they'll protect him where they can. Have they got the players to do that? That's the big question, and that's going to be interesting from a point of juggling lineups, because they don't have a Ray Allen, they don't have James Jones, and those kind of guys that you could try and spot start here and there just to try and get him through the regular season. So that's going to be an interesting one. But I think Dwayne Wade is not going to be what we've seen in recent years, unfortunately. I mean, we've seen his body slow down, so it wouldn't be surprised if he did try and go back down the low block at times. But I'd be honest with you, I don't really know what to expect from Dwayne Wade anymore. I really don't. I mean, his body at times is really slowing down quite considerably. I mean, I find it even strange to believe at the moment that he may be even in this league for another 2 years. He may only play another year, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, he's a keep getting them checks candidate. He's going to sit on the bench with the nice suit doing the pumping fist for the last year. He ain't going anywhere. He'll do the 2 years and then bail out and be like an assistant or something. I think they're going to be good. That's all I can say about them. I think they make the playoffs. Let's finish with a team that's returning to the NBA of some sort, Stephen Edwards. I think this team's going to be really fun as well. The Charlotte Hornets, they signed Lance Stevenson. They went 43-39 last year. They bring in Noah Vonleh, Marvin Williams, PJ Hairston, the guy who's a little bit iffy. He had to go to the D-League, kicked out of college. I really like this team.
Yeah, I do. I think this is a team that actually wins the division.
You do?
Yeah, I've got the Charlotte Hornets to actually win the division. They'll be the other main seed in the Eastern Conference. Lance Stevenson pickup, really good. $9 million a year,
Epic
3 years,
contract.
$27.4 million. Great contract. That really is. And I know a lot of people didn't want to touch Lance Stevenson because, we all know what Lance brings with him. Lance is still a tremendous basketball player in this league. And I think that's a great contract. I mean, Noah Vonleh, I think that's really good. I'd love to see Vonleh out there on the front line with Al Jefferson. I think that would be really interesting. Al Jefferson, for anyone who didn't watch the last 3 months of the NBA season last year, was there a better big man in the Eastern Conference in the last 3 months of last season?
All year long, offensively.
I think from a point of view, I think probably like Hibbert was the best to start off with, then Noah's tremendous. But I think Al Jefferson just really raised his game another notch in about those last 2 to 3 months. And for me, he was unstoppable going towards the end of the season. Very, very dangerous player. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, he ran into the Miami Heat in the first round of the playoffs. So he didn't really give them much hope. But sometimes you have to have that baptism of fire to try and learn what playoff basketball is all about. And, the players will be definitely better for that. They've got guys there that can really help them out. I mean, Gary Neal's been to the playoffs, obviously, with the Spurs. I like Brian Roberts as well as a backup for Kemba Walker. I think at times you'll see Vonleh out there with Jefferson and Gerald Henderson as well. There's a lot to like about this team. I think they've got some very good scoring across the board. They're defensively, I think they're pretty sound. This is what happens when Michael Jordan doesn't start making player personnel decisions.
I know.
All of a sudden, players start coming in, and you start drafting a lot better.
They've done a really, really good job in the last few years. The Al Jefferson pickup was just divine intervention. That's terrific. Kemba Walker is a draft pick, now bringing in Lance. I love that almost everyone can shoot, and that's a question I'll get to in a minute. Everyone seems to be able to at least score and get some buckets. And then defensively, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is going to be a really good defender. Jefferson can hold his own, so can Kemba. Lance is athletic and at least tries. They're going to be really good all season long. My main thing with them is, can Kidd-Gilchrist shoot enough as they claim? And then when Al Jefferson kicks it out, it goes down the low block. Lance off the ball is pretty good, so is Kemba. But if they can get Kidd-Gilchrist to shoot trays at a decent efficiency level, that's going to take them to a whole other level.
If you can do that, that will be really good for them.
And they had the Vine where he made like 8 in a row, if I remember correctly, but in-game situation, hands flying all in his face, people screaming at him. It's still to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can give that'll be great. I mean, the thing is now, all teams are crying out for guys that are very good wing defenders and can knock down a three. 3 and D guys. That's what a lot of teams are looking for in this league now, because they really do provide you with so much, because they're the guys you can bring off the bench. You get them from an offensive standpoint, at the same time they'll hold their own defensively as well. So they're in big time demand. And if Michael Kidd-Gilchrist can turn into that kind of player, then Charlotte have got themselves a really nice piece there, and he'll be a very good player that they can bring off the bench at times or jiggle their lineup somewhat. I think the other thing is as well, when you look at what they've actually managed to get rid of as well from their team. I mean, Josh McRoberts, really, as we've already talked about, he was overpaid in Miami, so it was a good decision there not to bring him back. They finally shedded Ben Gordon as well, and some of the other guys they got rid of. They've actually started clearing out the crap and now beginning to put together a really nice team. Yeah, they're back to being called the Hornets, which I think is a really good thing as well. I like the Hornets. I'm not a fan of their uniforms.
Wow.
I'm just really not a fan of them. I didn't like when they was unveiled. I would have preferred to see them go back to something that looked like the Hornets uniforms of old. I know they've tried to take those uniforms and bring them into the 21st century, but they just remind me of like those awful Oregon NCAA jerseys that are just too far out there. I'm not a fan. I suppose over the course of the season I'll get used to them. I think I'm probably more looking forward to the throwback games when they will wheel out the Hornets uniforms of the late 80s, early 90s. But yeah, not necessarily a fan. But this team is primed to win at least 50 games and win this division. And this is going to be a team that a lot of teams might not want to play in the playoffs.
They're going to be really fun. They're going to get up and down the court. And I love the backcourt rotation with Kemba and Lance. Both can play off ball. Both want to play with the ball, but they can give the ball up and can both shoot effectively enough. Kemba's a pretty good shooter. And then Cody Zeller can really shoot. Noah Vonleh can really shoot. They stretch the floor. And Bismack's a good backup big man. So they have every position covered. The only thing you're looking for then is just some veteran leadership. Can Al Jefferson be that guy? Can Kemba develop into a big time leader? They're the questions that need to be answered. But maybe, I saw Bill Simmons talk about this today. If Indiana's all out, someone like a David West fits them really well as a veteran trade chip.
Yeah, David West is potentially a player they could look at. I mean, just anyone that can give them some kind of veteran leadership.
That's all they're lacking.
It is. And that's part of the growing pains of going into the playoffs. And if you lose it, unfortunately, it's one of those things. But you learn a hell of a lot from that experience. And at the moment, they've got a lot of guys on those teams that really haven't played in any real amount of playoff games. I mean, Gary Neal is the exception. Obviously, Lance has played there with Indiana. But, I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that were really just getting their first taste again of being back in a playoff scenario. So it is very difficult, and it's a completely different ball game. It's so, people say, well, of course it is. It's the playoffs, but it is. It's different mentality. It's more physical. It is a completely new season, and you've got to be able to have something else that you didn't have during the regular season. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're in with a good shot of around about that divisional title, or they're trying to get to that point, that they don't go out there and make a deal for some kind of a veteran presence that's going to help them in the long run.
Coach Marv's question, are they balanced enough offensively to be a serious Eastern Conference team? I love their balance. You've got Al Jefferson in the high and low post. You can kick it out to Kemba, Lance, Kidd-Gilchrist with the fast break. I think it's a pretty well-balanced offense.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, again, probably the thing that's holding them back is that they've got a balanced offense but no superstar.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to take the shot when they need that shot to be taken? That's where at the moment I kind of struggle with them, because you kind of need that player at times during the regular season, also in the playoffs.
Kemba's been a big-time late-game shot taker throughout his college career and into the NBA so far. I don't know if he can be that, whether he's the superstar late shot taker, but I don't know if their stats will be much different to his just because they're a superstar. He's been pretty good late in the game.
Yeah, he's as near as you got. I mean, I am really impressed by Kemba Walker. I think, again, he's another guy that, along with the Hornets, doesn't get the credit he deserves. I think he's a tremendous player, and I think it'll be interesting to see I mean, that's a question I raise, is about the national recognition for this team this season. I think if they get out of the gate really, really well, I think they're going to be fighting with Miami from the bat, and then eventually Miami may very well drop off because they're going to have to rest players and everything else. And Washington obviously will be off to a slow start, I think, anyway. And that's, I think, what ultimately is going to get the Hornets his divisional title. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really good story, really good team. And again, you look at this team, you think, oh, it's not just going to be 1 year. This is a team that's on the rise. And they've got a hell of a lot going for them. It'll be interesting to see how they go over the next couple of years.
I completely agree. I love them, the young legs, the athleticism. And Lance is the guy who's going to put them on the stage nationally because of just the character he is. People will tune in, social media will go crazy because Lance is going to do something that's going to have people discussing the Hornets. They're a good team. Let's finish with our prediction for winner. Are you going with the Hornets?
Yeah, I'm going for the Hornets to win this division.
I want to take the Hornets. I sort of want to take Miami because I feel sorry for them. But I will take the Hornets as well. Let's go divisional MVP.
John Wall.
It's a good shout. Do they have to win the division, or at least come second for him to be divisional MVP?
No, I think they'll be second in the division. They'll get off to a slow start, but they'll be second in the division. I think for me, I've got it that it's the Hornets, then the Wizards, then the Heat, then the Hawks, and then the Magic. So I think they'll finish second, and I think they'll close strong. And look very, very good. I just think they'll give up maybe a bit too much at the start to Charlotte. I think that'll get off to a good start.
I will go with Lance, because I love Lance. Who doesn't love Lance? Let's go with Lance. I think he puts them over the top. They win the division, and that to me makes him a valuable commodity. They're winning divisions now because Lance is there, so I'll take Lance Stevenson. Stephen Edwards, that is another preview in the books. That's the Eastern Conference in the books.
That is the Eastern Conference. That's 3 divisions down, 3 to go. The NBA season is almost here.
We are 7 days away.
Incredible, isn't it? 7 days away from another NBA season.
7 days away.
It seems like only yesterday that the Spurs won the title.
Thank you for checking out this preview. We will be back again as we move along to the Western Conference.